Hi, I'm attorney Sherri Stinson, your Palm Harbor estate planning attorney, and I've been helping families in Pinellas and Pasco counties protect their assets, their families, and what matters to them most for over 20 years. And today I want to talk to you about the different types of estate administration in Florida. So frequently I will have people call my office and they'll say, I have a bank or a financial institution asking for a small estate affidavit. Florida doesn't really have that, but it's a term that you might hear. So there's a couple of kinds of estate administration in Florida, and depending on your scenario, they may or may not apply. So one example I won't spend a lot of time on is disposition without administration. This doesn't apply for most people, but you might see it referenced on a court website. One of the big ones is something called a summary administration, that small estate. So, summary administration is generally reserved for estates under $75,000 at the time of this recording, or if someone has been dead for more than 2 years. Now, with a summary administration, you don't need an attorney to do that kind of administration. But we often find that people try to start that process themselves and they get a little bit confused about the paperwork that the clerk's office sends out. And so they call our office and they ask for help. So that $75,000 does not include the value of the homestead. But the downside to this is if you have someone who's been dead for less than 2 years, you really have to be aware of potential creditors sitting out there. So this is people that the decedent owed money to. And the biggest problem that we see with that is we'll have people come to us and they'll say, they really didn't owe anybody any money. Everything was paid off. I was on top of their bills. And then we'll have a creditor come from out of nowhere. So this might be an old medical bill that you didn't know about. We find that often medical billing is really behind. It might be an old credit card. It might even be a credit card that was past the time for which they could legally collect, but that company still wants to get their money. So this can be used, but it's got to be used in the right scenario. The other type of estate administration is called a formal administration. Now, this sounds bigger and scarier than what it is, but this has some certain things attached to it. So, for example, you have to have a personal representative, that's what Florida calls executors, appointed. With a summary administration, you don't need that. Formal administrations also don't have that value tied to them, but typically I like to suggest these when someone has been deceased for less than 2 years because we don't want those creditors coming out of the woodwork. With a summary administration, if you tell the court there's no creditors and then it turns out there were, you can potentially be personally liable for that for anybody who received money out of the estate. And doing a formal administration really just tells those creditors, get to the court, present your claims, or else you're barred. Now, a formal administration can take some time. We do have to work our way through the court system. We have to make sure that certain procedures are followed, but this typically works for most people. Now, one thing that often happens is I'll have somebody die in another state. They were residents of that state, but they owned property here. And so that's a scenario where you might need a probate as well. Remember, with probate, there's expenses tied to that, attorney's fees, costs. And so it can typically take a little bit of time and cost a little bit of money. Now, I'm sure you have questions after watching this video. So if so, I invite you to give my office a call. You can also visit my website or check out some of our other YouTube videos. And when it comes to probate, the Florida Bar also has some really good resources on this. You can also visit the Florida Bar's website. They've got some nice pamphlets that will tell you exactly all of the details around this. We look forward to talking to you and we invite you to give us a call. Thanks for watching.